Oh, okay, you're gonna start, okay.
No, I was.
We came in late.
Okay.
No, I was talking to Charlie about I was at Def Leppard and Journey last night.
Hey,
For real, I was. And today's going to be just as riveting, I would say. Yeah, hysteria. So that's a Def Leppard song for those who don't know what Def Leppard.
Did you sing it?
And yeah, no, I'm not going to sing it. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Francis has done a quick introduction. So from the DVBIA's perspective, this is our first ever mayoral candidate discussion. I'm Gary Cooney. I'm the chair of the DVBIA. I also work with Cooney Associates. Got to know some of these people over the years, being an urban planning and land development consulting firm. The lovely Luca Chuton is the co-host. He's also the vice chair and a business lawyer at Belgian Law. He's also very proudly Italian.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
We have a very positive script here, so I'm going to try and sell it as well as I can. So my line after Gary's intro was, "Thanks, Gary." Thank you to you, our DVBIA members, for joining us today. We're glad you could be here to be part of such an important conversation.
You sound like a commercial.
Yeah, I'm selling it.
Yeah, no, you sound like you're doing a great job. So this year, more than ever, we have so much to discuss with candidates and also so many candidates. And not only for mayor, but also for council. I was looking through the list and I saw Roller Girl, for real, was also running for mayor. Probably a record number of candidates for mayor and council. Bike lanes to business permits, a lot of things I think that you want to talk about. Francis has already mentioned that we want to hear questions from you. And what we'll do is you can submit your questions electronically. So it's going to be e-questions only.
But first, just a little bit on how today came to be. As you all probably know, the DVBIA is an association that's made up of members from a variety of different industries. We have members who work in retail, professional services, like legal, property management, food and beverage, not-for-profit, and so many more. We have employees, small business owners, and building owners. So when looking to see what our diverse membership wanted most, we understood that it was an opportunity to be part of the larger conversation taking place.
DVI wants to make sure that we are hearing from you, so we advocate for the issues that matter most to the DVBI members. What we've done over the last little while is listen to your concerns and provide opportunities for discussion. This is one of those. So this event, we wanted to make sure that we brought together different voices, your interests, all of your interested industries in the DVBIA, and just give you a chance to participate. So the first part of the event is going to consist of questions that we've chosen that we hope represent the issues that are most top of mind for you. And then after that, we're going to open it up for you to get involved.
Which leads us to the next point. We are using a new tool today called Slido, which will allow you to submit questions for our candidates. You simply open a browser on your phone, go to www.slido.com, and enter our event code, which is Election 2018. You can then submit your questions, and you can also vote on questions that other guests have submitted. This means that the most popular and in-demand questions will rise to the top.
The questions come up on the screen?
No.
They don't, okay.
Oh,
That sounded like Charles.
Lost that too.
With so many candidates running in this year's mayoral race, there's so many important issues that are top of mind for Vancouverites, but from our perspective, from the downtown business members. So today, we're focusing on the issues that directly relate to the downtown core, as well as some of the broader issues that would be of relevance to Greater Vancouver. So to give you an idea of some of the themes that we're discussing, got questions about business permits, housing affordability, transportation, homelessness. Looking forward to chatting about this. Luca.
And we have an absolute pro to help us navigate all these very complex issues. Our moderator today is award-winning journalist Francis Boulard. If you've lived in Vancouver for even a brief period of time, you undoubtedly already know who Francis is. She is a mainstay to Vancouver's media landscape and has been covering Vancouver's news since 1994. Her political savvy is almost unparalleled, and she was actually called the reigning queen of City Hall by Vancouver magazine. It's easy to see why Francis was our first choice to moderate this event.
My notes say couldn't agree with you more, Luca.
Yeah, sell it.
It says that in my notes. It also says we are so fortunate to have Francis with us. I wrote in, she's probably looking for more material to write about. So, just listing some of the publications. I've known Frances a long time, and I'm sure a number of you have read some of the work that she's done, but she's probably in every major publication in the city. I've known Frances for over 10 years, maybe longer, and I would say she's honest, she's honorable, she takes journalism very seriously, and in today's global political climate, that's a pretty impressive role for her to take on. She's also in radio and has a huge social media following. Anybody wants to follow her, she is at Fabula, F-A-B-U-L-A, Fabula Vancouver, and you can keep up with everything that she's writing about. So please now join us in welcoming Frances, who's going to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so I jumped the gun. That was interesting. I have to laugh when I see that the question's already the thing you're most interested so far is community amenity contribution. So I can tell this is going to be a total nerd crowd. So go for it in your answers. Clearly they can tolerate it. Say infrastructure as many times as you want. Okay, so there's a lot of questions here, and I think that you will also have a lot of questions for the candidates. So I will just get started quickly here. And what I would like to do to start off is have each of you talk for 2 minutes about the ultimate question that we're here for, which is you are applying to be the CEO of a very large organization. I believe the budget now is $1.4 billion, and who knows how much with capital spending. And 8,000 employees in umpteen different unions. You have to deal with the public constantly in a way that probably no other level of politics has to. And so why, in this job interview that you have here, why are you qualified to be the CEO of this organization? And what I'm going to do is, I very scientifically ripped up some paper and put your names on so that we can have something random rather than alphabetical to decide who goes first. And I'm going to let David Chen pick out the first name so that I'm not looking at it. Okay, read it out.
Edgar.
Okay, that didn't work out so well. Well, I was trying to get out of alphabetical order. Okay, go ahead, 2 minutes. Why should you be the CEO of this organization?
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to be here, and thanks to Downtown DIA and Frances for making the time. Not enough people participate in these things, and that is probably the biggest challenge that we have in democracy today. I guess I'm qualified for the job because I understand that it's not a CEO position. That really you are actually sort of the chief servant more than anything. Your job is to consult, your job is to liaise, your job is to listen, and your job is to aggregate that information and make the best possible policy. And you know, what I'm really excited about is the opportunity to bring forward a new team at Vancouver City Hall. Get away from the divisive politics that I've seen at City Council. I'm the only person who has taken the time to sit at City Council, and move away from this hyper-partisan, deeply vitriolic time towards a more ideas-focused time. Right now, we start with no, and we argue about how to get to maybe. And many of your businesses have experienced that. Years of arguing about how to get to maybe, whereas we say yes, and we're going to work on the how. So 5 small business owners are running with me for City Council. One of them is here today, Brenda Baines, who has a chain of bakeries downtown here, and also some really wonderful people for Parks Board and School Board. He was here for Parks Board. But I really want you to consider, just like in your business, that this is about a plan. This isn't like any job interview. You know, of course, every candidate will come in and, you know, razzle-dazzle you and have all the buzzwords. But I want you to understand that this is about a plan. Yes, Vancouver has one. Go to yesvancouver.ca and compare. Thank you.
Okay. I'll let you pick the next next person.
Is David Chen will be fine. Way young.
Go ahead.
My name is Wei Young and I'm running for mayor because I am ready to lead. I've lived in the city for over 50 years and have seen where it's grown and become. We are facing a multitude of issues here that are very complex. And that's why you're here today, I think, to spend your time to find out what we have to say about these issues. So I welcome the discussion. Thank you so much for being here, Francis. What I want people to know is that Vancouver is at a crossroads. We've had a government in place for over a decade, and we've seen what's happening on our streets or in our businesses. So I think that the top things I want to say, because I've only got 2 minutes, is that we have a situation here downtown where vagrancy has been normalized, and there's been no answers for that. It's threatening our small businesses. We discussed that, Charles, at a meeting recently. And it's affecting all lifestyle, livability, tourism, all kinds of facets that Vancouver faces. And these are real issues that we need to talk about and ask the hard questions about, do some serious planning around in consultation with our communities. The spot zoning has to change and not happen because the consultations with our communities is not happening and has not been happening for a long time. So when I met with businesses down here, with residents down here, that is the #1 sense of angst, that their voices have not been heard at City Hall. I'm ready to lead because I actually wrote the social planning guide for BC. In that guide, the point of it all was to work with people. And many of you here, I think you're in architecture or events in that sector. We use urban planning to plan for the people in the city. It's not the other way around. So when we're not listening to the people and where they want to be, their priorities, solving those complex issues, that's where we're falling down. I'm ready to lead because for 50 years I've lived here, and for 20 years I ran my own social policy company. My consultancy was to do social policy locally, provincially, and across Canada. So there are a list of many different programs and services that I've actually implemented in Canada. So I've got the experience of having done social policy. We've had a businessman run a Happy Juice company, lead our city, and we know how that turned out. What I'm asking people to consider is you want someone with a social policy background who's actually implemented policy, services, programs across the country, and who has also had experience in government, managing government. I went to Ottawa as a member of Parliament, and we balanced the budget. We also did a lot of zero-based budgeting in the departments. I also sat on a red tape committee where we streamlined services, brought down the red tape. These are all issues that I think need to be looked at the city, and I'm ready to lead and make sure that that happens here. My children want to come home.
Oh, you're at 0,
Okay.
so we'll have to get to the
Sure.
children later. Thank you. Next.
David.
Okay, I'd like to stand up because a bit of background. Thank you for inviting us down here to the downtown Vancouver BIA. It's quite an honor. I do have to first acknowledge that we are on unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people, so Hitchcock. It's an interesting position to be applying for this. It's not really CEO. It's a blend of a lot of different things. What you're looking at is you're looking at a leader that needs to unite people, listen to people, and understand it has a business function, but also it is a servant position. When we talk about Vancouver, it's a $40 billion a year business or whatever everybody wants to estimate, it's way up there. It's way more than the average person knows how to deal with. But the reality is this, it's not a business where you're the customers. It's a business where you're actually the boss. And so you need to have someone who understands that dual role. Someone who's actually been in place that has run businesses. Myself, I've run businesses since 1993 after I got back from McGill. Also, you need someone who understands governance. Politics is politics only because it becomes divisive. But the reality is you're all brothers and sisters. The difference is you just have a different opinion. And what we need to do when we're in government is we have to unite all of those needs so that we can actually produce policy that will meet the needs of more than it actually leaves behind. So in reality, I'm a jack of all trades. I'm a certified financial planner, got a degree in pre-med, got a degree in biopsych. I've run blue collar, I've run white collar. And so in essence, I'm probably the best one for you to meet all of your needs. Thank you. Ken.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Ken Sim and I'm running for Mayor of Vancouver. I think it's important to understand why I'm running. I have family, friends, neighbors, co-workers, people that I mentor. A lot of them are leaving town. We have lost a big chunk of our younger generation who have left Vancouver and probably not coming back. Our seniors, they're either leaving by choice or they're unfortunately more often than not getting forced out of their own homes. I have 4 boys. My eldest boy is 17 years old and he does not see a future for himself or his friends in Vancouver, and he's not even thinking about affordability. Now I know we can turn the ship around. I would say about 80% of the stuff that we're dealing with are made in Vancouver challenges. And so we are going to turn that ship around. Why am I qualified to be the Mayor of Vancouver? Well, out of the group here, I'm the only person who has run a complex organization. So I co-founded a company called Host Next Door. We have over approximately 200 locations across North America. In our system, we probably have about 8,000 employees. I always say 5 just to be conservative, including 1,000 of our own employees. The second company I co-founded is a company called Rosemary Rock Salt. It's in the quick serve restaurant industry. So I'm acutely aware of what businesses go through, the struggles that they go through in today's environment. I'm a chartered accountant as well, so I understand financials. I understand what we need to do to turn the city around. And so that's why I'm qualified.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. So I love Vancouver. I moved here from Nova Scotia in the late 80s with $100 that my grandmother gave me. And this city's given me absolutely everything. From delivering beer and working at Radio Shack, to begin with getting a job at City Hall in the planning department, getting a degree at Simon Fraser, and then later at the PhD in the London School of Economics, and then back here downtown teaching at Harbour Center's Simon Fraser's Public Policy School, where I met my wife, Dr. Jeanette Ash, who teaches at Douglas College now. So this city's giving me absolutely everything, and I think this city's in trouble. When we see, I went to a coffee shop on Commercial Drive, absolutely packed. One woman behind the counter serving coffee, I talked to her and she said I had 2 long-term employees just leave here today. I offered them $5 an hour raise and they still left because the housing prices are too high. And so I have a plan for housing. I've worked in this, all my PhD, all my studies, and all my consulting work has been on cities and housing policy. So I have a plan. I'm the only one with a plan here that I'll lay out actual numbers for you and steps for how we kind of get to a point where we can sort out our housing problem here, or at least make it better, and that's good for business. That's because that will lower your labor costs and allow people to live and work here in the city rather than commuting in from outside. The other thing is I have experience in government. I'm not just talking about it. The 7 years as a member of Parliament. I've dealt with Ottawa, and that's specifically where we're going to have to deal right after the election. We've got a global economic storm happening. NAFTA signing is going to sort things out, but it's also going to raise interest rates, and we have inflation going up at the same time. So you need a mayor that can get to work right away, that understands Ottawa, that has good connections in Victoria, and I'm that person. Thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
And Shauna Sylvester.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you, Carrie, Luca, Charles, and DVBIA. As a former member of the board of DVBIA, it's wonderful to be here. My name is Shauna Sylvester, and I do want to be your mayor. And Francis asked the question about qualifications. I have served on the board of Van City, which was a $14 billion company or a cooperative at the time. I've served on the board of Mountain Equipment Co-op. I've served on the board of the BC Assessment Authority. I have been an executive director in a leadership position since I was 25 years old. I have built 5 different social enterprises. I grew up in a family business. More importantly, though, those take care of some of the financial accountability, good governance, some of the work around qualifications that help me understand what it is to govern. But what I really have, which I think we need in this city, is the capacity to work across difference. The capacity to work with people who do not agree with each other, bring them together, and get them working for the service of the city of Vancouver and the people of Vancouver rather than their political parties. I am the only independent candidate. I have 30 years of working as a convener and facilitator. I often get the call from cities when things go wrong. I've worked with the federal government in trying to design a new agenda for urban cities, for cities. I have worked with the cities of Victoria, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto on almost all the major issues. I was the task force. I led the task force on housing here in the city. I convened the groups that work on transportation, all the major transportation players, for 5 years. DVBIA was one of them. This is a time when we need real leadership, and leadership that's really focused on what the people of Vancouver need. Thank you very much, and I hope on October 20th you will vote for somebody with expertise.
Okay, so now we're going to get into specific issue questions, there's some fascinating ones coming in from the audience, but I'm going to ask one of the ones that the BIA gave me first, because I think it is top of mind for a lot of people. So, a lot of businesses in the city, as we just heard from Kennedy, are having a really hard time recruiting talent, and whether it's CEOs or someone to work in the coffee shop, it seems to be a problem at all levels. I'd like you get 90 seconds to explain how you're going to solve housing, which is a global problem, but anyway, go ahead. And I know a lot of people have made promises about we're going to build this many units per year and so on. And I think people are confused about how exactly those numbers are going to get there. Are you relying on government funding? Are you going to somehow unleash the private market to do this? So especially for this audience, maybe a few more specifics on what your housing plan is for that group of people, from CEO to coffee shop worker for your term. And I think what we'll do is start at that end. Wei Young, and each question that I do will move over one person with who starts, okay? So go ahead, Wei Young, you're first.
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Francis, because I have my housing policy right here, and you'll find that online. I think the key thing that we're doing, which is completely innovative and has long-term benefits to our city, is that we will not, with the Coalition Vancouver Council and myself as mayor, we will not sell another inch of city land, period. We believe fundamentally that Vancouver land should be for Vancouverites and not turned over to the developers who have been, as you know, selling out our city, building luxury condos for offshore speculators, and on that goes. And that's one of the critical issues that have driven unaffordable housing in the city for a long time, for over a decade. We need to separate out the issue between supply and affordability. My contention is there are no supply issues in the sense that any millionaire walking around the city can buy a place in Vancouver. The issue is really affordability. How do we make that affordable? And we make it affordable by keeping our city land, doing purpose-built rental, doing entry-level buildings for millennials, so that for $300,000 and about $1,500 per month, they can enter the housing market. And we will do this by leveraging city land, zoning, tax incentives, as well as 3P partnerships. And I see that my time's up.
Okay, great. So using city land to be able to bring the prices down. Okay, Shauna.
Thank you. I'll focus, that was a big question, but I'll focus just on housing. So land, using city land. I think every candidate is going to say the same thing, using city land, but specifically working with the community housing sector in partnership, not treating them as just the operators. They have the capacity and the capital pools to bring to bear. So if they can get the city land, we have co-op housing, we have community housing, 40 years of experience developing purpose-built rental for specific audiences, for specific target groups. So we're going to work with that. So that's the first piece. The second is renew the leases on co-op lands and make Vancouver the North American capital for co-ops and co-housing. They're a model that work, and the Co-op Housing Federation has now the capital pools, and they can in turn leverage additional money from pensions if we can get a number of deals to aggregate them. So that's another very important piece. Housing authorities are critical. They solve the situation in Whistler. We can focus in on creating housing authorities for particular employee groups: nurses, firefighters, first responders.
Thanks. Kennedy.
Thank you. I actually do think that the numbers are important, so I'll just quickly go over my plan because I'm the only one with the plan that gives you actual numbers. So over the next 10 years, we build 85,000 units. 25,000 will be what you've heard. They're affordable rental built on city or other lands, mostly city, run by not-for-profits. That's 25,000, and that is targeted at the income rate, households making under $80,000 a year. 25,000 regular market rentals, and then 35,000 co-ops or others. So, sorry, condos or others. So it's based on the current plan that the city's put forward of 72,000 units, but I do think we can be more aggressive on what I would call workforce housing. That's the housing that would the people from the coffee shop in my first example, the workers would be able to live in, and we could put it around places like the new St. Paul's Hospital, where of course we'll have 10,000 people working in this great new facility, but no housing built into that plan. So that's what we really have to do, where we're going to have everybody commuting from Mission into work for the city, and they'll be demanding wage increases, which is happening right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Ken.
Great. So I think there are a couple of things. I know there are a lot of plans floating out there. A lot of the plans actually do not make sense because you can't build 85,000 units in 10 years. When you look at the plan, that counts for 8,500 units a year. And Andy Yan, who's a professor at SFU, actually says we don't have the capacity to build those. Our plan, which you can find on our website at mpavancouver.ca, is actually real. And it actually addresses the immediate issue. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to allow for 2 secondary suites and homes across Vancouver. And so there are over 40,000 homes in Vancouver. If a small percentage of the homeowners take us up on our offer, we will actually create almost immediate relief on the housing situation in all of our communities. So people who can actually work and live nearby their place. Now, not everyone is going to want to live in a basement suite. That totally makes sense. But what it does, it actually provides relief on rental prices on condos and townhomes as well. The second thing we're going to do is we're actually going to speed up the permitting process. Everyone says they're going to do it. It's not a new idea. City Hall already knows.
I'm going to stop you because you're out of time, and we're going to talk about permits more later. Okay. So we can finish that then. Thank you. David.
Okay, so we're not talking about a really important financial aspect, which is between 1970 to 1983, housing prices averaged 4 times the median family income in Vancouver. There's a mathematical reason. So if you run a mortgage, 20% down, 4%, 25-year amortization, you get 4 times annual. It's disconnected now, and this is actually why workers can't afford to live here. We've got people in our community that are paying entry-level engineers $85,000 a year, and they don't want to live here because they can't afford it. So the reality is we have to do something that is a laser focus. We have to go after the empty homes. Doing door knocking, I believe in others, there's actually 25,000 empty homes in Vancouver. We've hit a lot of them while door knocking. But I want to laser focus. The problem with the existing EHT, it's a massive net. You got a lot of bycatch. My target is not the pensioner, the snowbird, the people who have lived here 10, 20, 30, 40 years and built this community. So we're interested in giving them tax credits so it doesn't affect them, but we got to nail the empty homes, the land banking, all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Hector.
Well, it's been fascinating to listen to some of my colleagues do their best impression of part of our plans, but the reality is in terms of none of these plans are qualified in Vision's, tinkering with Vision's current plan we know is not working. That's not a plan. 40,000 basement suites is ridiculous. The reality is that all of these are talking about symptoms of But the disease is, for our city, what we've been functionally working with, is a 91-year-old city plan. We're the only city in North America that doesn't city-initiate pre-zone. That way, that means that most of you, even for your own businesses, when you apply for a new permit at your business, are forced into a rezoning. This is the reason for the lengthy permit times, 2 years as an average right now, 5 to 7 years to build a multi-residential building. And here we have a plan for a new city master plan, which will pre-zone the city to the greatest extent that we can, a 3-year market correction program for rental that is real, is based on real evidence, not professors that pretend to be, and also we are ensuring that planning is being driven by a chief economist, not just building form. We can talk more about these things, but I really encourage you, go online and actually compare the plans. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I was going to have a second round where I asked each person to critique the worst idea that they heard from their fellow candidates, but I think we've heard that already. Yes.
We've done this before.
Yeah. Okay. I am going to go to a question that I see on Slido that is also in here, and I think is of huge interest to people. So the second question here is, after 2 years of 10 to 15% property tax increases, City Hall told me yesterday that my advance payment due in January 2019 will be 40% up from 2018. The question is just sustainable, but obviously, you know, the issue is taxes for businesses and what's happening with them. So I will start with Shauna and then work this way.
Thank you. This is a big one. I'm going to go straight to the issue of the assessment authority, and it's an idea I've sat down with Mike Harcourt, a cabinet minister and the former commissioner. I used to sit on the assessment authority. I actually think we can create a subcategory under commercial so that we can protect small business, local business. That will give us the capacity to offer a different mill rate, a lower mill rate. Right now, small businesses are bunched with all businesses, and they are taking 4.8 times what residents have to pay in terms of property taxes. This is completely unsustainable, and it's killing our small businesses, and particularly our local businesses. We also have to clean up the permitting process so that we can deal with what is facing small businesses, creating an ombudsperson role. But I think if we don't start to protect our small businesses, we will not have vibrant high streets. We will not have a vibrant small business community. And I want to work with BIAs to make that happen.
Kennedy.
Right, so I know small business, just part of my summer campaigning has been going to business on all kinds of the high streets all over the city, and the costs are really spiraling out of control, both labor costs, but also the commercial property tax costs. So I do recognize this, so I was very honored to sit down with a roundtable of BIA representatives up by City Hall, City Square, and what was said to me was that folks would like a review of this. So I absolutely committed to this, to have a review of the commercial property tax rates after the election. This has been promised for almost a decade with this hasn't been delivered, so this is what I would do. And I would include in this an overall review of how these taxes are being levied and the impacts. I think I've heard some good ideas from Hector with he's had a few ideas about how we might split these taxes up when it comes to rezoning different properties, and so all of that would be included in the review as we go forward. So that would be my plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I live this firsthand. If we have a low restaurant on Commercial in Kitchener, and we actually pay just as much in property taxes as we do in rent, and that's why you're seeing a gut for high streets, Robson, Davie, Denman, Commercial. You see empty storefronts throughout the city. And so all our colleagues here actually have great ideas, and we have to work with BC assessments. We have to Hector had a split assessment idea. Shauna has great ideas, and so we will go after these and implement them. I think the one thing that's missing though is the city has to look at itself as well, and how we address this issue longer term for the better of all our businesses is we have to get our fiscal house in order. The reason why these property taxes are going up is because our budget has literally doubled in the last 10 years from 700 million to 1.4 billion. And so we have to look at where we have wasteful spend and we have to get rid of it.
Great, thank you. David?
So this is where Ken and I share similar thoughts. Reality is you can talk about jigging mill rates all you want, but you have to remember that it's a pro rata share of the annual budget. So if you jig the rate, all you're going to trigger is a deficit. And then you're going to trigger city spending, then you're going to trigger loan costs, and you're going to increase the per share cost to each taxpayer. Reality is, as Ken says, the budget 10 years ago was $700 million a year. Now it's $1.4 billion. We don't have double the people, we don't have double the cost of living, we don't have double the services. So where's the money? The best way to figure this out is if you can go in there and find out where that money went, remove wrongful spending. We know by a bunch of articles that we have some of the highest salaries that are paid in City Hall, and we're not sure they're justified. Communications Department alone has got 44 people working in there, all right? And so when you look at that, that's where you're gonna make a difference. I found within the books that there are transfers in kind with CACs. And all you business owners, you know, try to do that with CRA. And they'll red flag you in a heartbeat because they don't like anything that's a transfer in kind. And that's where we're going to start fixing the system. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I don't know what a transfer in kind is, but maybe we can get into that later.
It's social housing. It's part of the development. Anyway, so the point is that we, Brenda Baines is a great example of this. You know, she's running 3 bakeries here in Vancouver, and she gets hit with $1,000 a month in more taxes and flow through on a triple net lease. How's a small business owner supposed to come up with $1,000 a month to pay taxes? Well, some of my colleagues here have mentioned my plan for split assessments for small business, also a full reset on commercial permits. We're going to get it down. And in many cases, we're going to try to get you your permit in the same day. We're going to treat commercial spaces as commercial spaces, and we're not going to put you through lengthy rezonings. But the other piece of this is that we actually need a core review, not a forensic audit. There's not fraud and all the rest of that stuff. It's just sort of off base. I think what is fair, though, is to say that the City of Vancouver needs a core review. We'll be announcing our panel and our team that will be leading that. But Vancouver needs this, it needs this now. Because right now, for example, in the planning department, we have the chief planner of the City of Vancouver has planning staff under 7 different business lines that he's not directly responsible for. So it's just an example of how disorganized the city is. It's been left to its own devices, and it's been rudderless for many years. It needs real leadership, and it needs a team of people that understand how to correct it.
Okay, Wei Young.
I think that this issue is a completely heartbreaking issue in the city of Vancouver because it's affected so many cities, businesses across Vancouver, whether it's our little neighborhoods or whether it's the downtown. The key is between heartbreak and sustainability. Where is that? And that's what the problem is in the city of Vancouver, where you have revenues that don't meet sales and don't meet what's going out, as Hector was saying. So what we're going to be doing is looking at split assessments. I was also on the board of the BC Assessment Authority, and very recently, actually, in the last few years. And that is something that we're studying and looking at, and I fully support that. Because when businesses are paying 5 times the amount of property taxes, but not receiving any services for that, and I've heard the horror stories of businesses saying, I get no service from the city for the 5 times that I pay. That's not right. So we're going to be implementing a small business unit at the city where you have direct service. We're going to be implementing a hotline for small businesses so that you get that direct service. And when you are having serious business issues at the city that impede your ability to conduct your business and to make those revenues that you need to meet your commitments regarding rent, but you're not getting it because you're in line with everybody else, every other residential person that has an issue, that's the issue there. We need to streamline the processes at the city, and we need to look at cutting your taxes.
Okay, I wish we had a way to vote in the room so that we could, I could get a vote on whether to cut spending at City Hall or move to a split assessment. But anyway, you'll have to, you can decide that in the voting booth. Or both, okay. I think I'm going to move on to a question that seems to be of interest to a lot of people, which is transit. The actual question that has the most number of votes right now is about the Broadway UBC line, with someone saying people seem to have different positions. What is yours? I'm going to ask you to answer that by answering in a way my question, which is if the provincial and federal government gave you $2 billion tomorrow for transit, how would you spend it? Would you spend it on, and obviously part of the question is, would you spend it on a Broadway subway extension out to UBC, or would you spend it on something else? So Kennedy, go ahead.
So I get $2 billion to spend right now in 15 seconds.
Yes.
Good thing I've been in Parliament forever because I have to make
Because you just
decisions
fixed the whole tax system, so now
Right.
let's move
Okay.
on.
Well, I do support the Broadway line all the way to UBC. However, I'm not going to overpromise and say that, like the Musqueam are promising money, which they're not, or the federal government's got money there, because it doesn't. Because I know this because I've been in Ottawa and I know how the federal government works. They decide and then they give you the money, they don't. So if I was going to spend $2 billion, I would actually spend it on buses. We have overcrowded buses, and that is actually what makes the city work the best. I would try to move from the diesel buses to electric buses if we could, but that money would go into buses, because that is what's making our congestion worse, too much car traffic, and our ridership in this region on transit is growing faster than anywhere else in North America. 6 to 8% of people now, we have additional riders on our transit every year, and their primary way of getting around is buses, so we need more buses.
Okay, and Shauna, he took a shot at you, so I'll let you answer that, but I'll just remind you to answer that when we come back, which is going to be at the end, sorry. Kenton,
Yeah, so
transit, Broadway, subway,
yeah,
etc.
I also support the extension, the Broadway extension, and I'd love to see the UBC line get built. I think what we have to do though is we have to make sure that UBC is on board and they have their plan, and TransLink's on board and they have their plan. We're working with them right now. So $2 billion isn't enough to cover it. It's looking at right now, if we were to launch it, it would be $3.5 billion. But guess what? If UBC and TransLink support it, we will find the money. We're actually conducting an independent review on traffic congestion in this city. The reality is that the number of cars have not increased in the city of Vancouver in the last 20 years, but congestion has. And so there are a bunch of reasons why congestion is up, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. Kennedy is correct. Bus service has grown at about 6% a year, but that's through the region. If you actually look at Vancouver, it's grown at about 1 to 2% in Vancouver itself. So I do believe buses are a solution, but they're not the only solution.
Okay, great, thanks. David Chen.
So when we're talking about transit, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You got to get to UBC. You got 140,000 people a day commuting to UBC, and that's a huge problem with regards to our congestion. Problem with transit's got to be reliable, it's got to be convenient, and it's got to be time saver, and it's got to be cheap. And we can't control those factors. That's controlled by the Mayor's Council, and that's controlled by TransLink. So if they're not on side, no matter what you do, you're going to have problems. But that being said, let's also look at the money. Okay, so Ken's correct. The current estimate is $3.5 billion to extend from Arbutus all the way to UBC. But we've talked to some engineers, and they said underground, it's actually solid granite. So your cost could be north of $6 billion. $2 billion is far short of what you actually need to do that. So the problem is, can you guarantee this without putting the taxpayer on the hook? I think a lot of people are really tired of signing checks that we can't afford to cash. Now, if we're looking at this from a fiscal perspective, the reality is buses, especially hydrogen fuel cell, is important because with a hydrogen fuel cell, we can cut the trolley lines. The biggest problem, if you've ever used a bus, and I've been on them, where your bus is full, it's not picking up passengers, and you can't get through because the bus in front of you is empty and it's stopping you. That trolley line is a huge problem. Going to a diesel bus will solve that, but it's not a better option. So we've got to think about all those fiscal things that we can actually get this happening, and yes, we've got to get to UBC. Thank you.
Hector.
Yesterday we announced that we will work towards, we have an action plan to get late night train service on Friday and Saturday nights to support our downtown businesses and once and for all address this issue. At City Council I was first in inches on this earlier this spring. The hospitality industry had come to us and said that they would consider a drink tax to chip in money. We went to TransLink and we said, hey, look, what if there was a slight user fee in the late night service? They thought that that was a good idea. I offered as mayor and as a board member of TransLink as part of the Mayor council that we would put all other future negotiations on the table to achieve this extra 16 hours of service. There's 780 hours in a month. I understand the need for track maintenance, but we can't tell me that you can't find 16 hours out of 780. So we would be targeting money towards late night train service because we believe it's a safety issue. We believe that it's critical to our downtown businesses, and we also believe that it's critical for tourism. Remember, Vancouver doubles in size every Friday and Saturday night, and we need late night train service.
Great. William?
Well, unlike Ken, we already know what's causing traffic congestion, and I think I've
What
been
could it
very
be?
vocal about that.
Tell us.
The
Go
bike
ahead.
lanes, we gotta get rid of those bike lanes that don't work. We love bike lanes that work, but the ones that don't have got to go. What I'd like to talk about actually is that there's a lack of experience here in doing major infrastructure, clearly, because with $2 billion, we can leverage that through 3P partnerships, whether it's private partnership and investment, and we've talked about UBC, and also whether it's different levels of government or even external business partnerships, that we can leverage that $2 billion to bring the money in to build the UBC line. I think that it's critical for us to be building for our future and not be taking big amounts of money like that, $2 billion, and not leveraging it and doing buses and basically pilfering it away. So I am very confident that as mayor, we can chop that around, we can get the leveraging we need, because as a member of parliament for Vancouver, I brought over 60 infrastructure projects to Vancouver. We built the Canada line, we built so many other things in this city, and I have the experience to do that.
Okay, and Shauna,
Sure, and I-
part two.
So I am going to take John here and say, I really hope we don't do a 3P like the Canada line. That was not in our best interest. So you have $2 billion, leverage. We have a mayor's council. It's really important for the leader of the city of Vancouver to show up at the mayor's council and to collaborate. Let's support part of what the mayor's council is doing in terms of the things that Hector's talking about, extending transit hour. Let's take some of that money. Let's take other money and leverage other money to build out to UBC. I would actually argue we are going to see conversations emerging from UBC and Musqueam about ways that we can look at building that out to UBC, connecting as an innovation center, ensuring that we have that economic development going across the region, that we use this major space, UBC, to connect it with the rest of the city. This is not difficult. It was always part of the plan of Mayor's plan to ensure that we have a strong, vibrant transportation system that has good transit, more handy darts, more C-buses. That's all within the plan. And what we need to do, what's missing and has been missing, is a mayor that has a really solid regional perspective that can come forward and leverage those resources. Thanks.
Great. Okay, we're almost at the halfway point, so just for a little fun round, I want you to say the most dangerous and practical idea that you've heard from any of your opponents. Loved. Ken, Sam, you get to start.
That landed on me.
Sorry, it is your turn, right?
It is
Aren't
my
you? You're
turn.
supposed to start this round?
Yeah, okay. Look, at the end of the day, I don't attack people, I attack ideas. I do think this whole rezoning of the entire city, I do not agree with the process whatsoever. In 6 days, 7 people decided how the city is going to be built in the future. I do.
Oh, you're talking about the recent duplex
Yeah.
rezoning. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's actually not proposed by any of the candidates here.
It's
Something
supported.
that already
It's
happened.
supported by some of the candidates.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is the process is incredibly flawed, and we shouldn't be making decisions like that without engaging our residents. I've spoken to over 7,000 people in this city since April 13th, and I can tell you a lot of people either didn't know what was going on or don't support it. It's in the minority of people that actually support it, and I think it's incredibly dangerous when we take the decisions away from the residents of Vancouver and we push them through with a small amount of people.
Okay, yeah, and you don't have to take your full 90 seconds if you don't want. This is meant to be a quicker round. David?
Thank you.
Most dangerous and practical idea from your opponent.
So I would say that I have to agree with Ken there that our ProVancouver team, and there's Raza there, myself and Rick, we actually went to City Hall to try and block this rezoning because it was done without a community plan. Now, coming back to what our competitors have actually said, I would say the most dangerous thing is to promise builds when you don't know the capacity, you don't know where the money's going to come from, and you don't know what the impact is going to be on the city. You can talk about theoretical stuff, but we've talked to neighborhood houses and all the amenities around us, and the challenge they have is if they don't know the impact of the new residents coming in, our whole infrastructure can collapse in on its own. So as an example, I grew up on the poor side of Point Grey, and I know everybody laughs about that, but 40 years ago it was poor, it was working class. But if you know those streets, they're cute. They're not actually wide enough to have emergency vehicles come through with traffic and all that, and if you increase the density, the problem is that you've got no gaps in the parked cars. Now we're also talking about energizing the city with electric vehicles. Well, do you know that a charger is 60 to 90 amp service and a hypercharger is 260? Problem is your typical house service is 100 amps. Our electrical grid can't handle this. So we have to really start thinking about, yes, it's partially supply, but a lot of it is the demand from unregulated global capital. And if we can tone that down and we can catch up with our infrastructure, then we might actually get a handle on this. Thank you.
Okay. Hector, worst idea of your competitors?
Where to begin?
I knew it was going to work out.
Honestly, I sit here in amazement some days, but I think that the most dangerous thing, I think that from myself and my perspective in this election is that the idea that partisanship or more of the same is going to get us out of this, that somehow if we just pick, it was mentioned the duplexes. Well, I mean, this is a red herring issue. It wasn't really rezoning anything. It's not an FSR increase of anything, and basically you already have multiple plexes on single-family detached lots. What is a house with 2 basement suites and a laneway house on a lot? What's the difference between that and a duplex? I think it's this sort of whipsaw, when we're talking about bike lanes, it's this whipsaw and wedge issue type of politics that has been extraordinarily dangerous and we've been suffering under for 10 years. Our city is more divided than ever. And some might criticize the fact that we want to institute a new citywide plan, but I ask you to consider what Vancouver was pre-2010 games. We had a star on the horizon, we had an objective, we had a goal, we didn't always agree, but we were working towards something. We need to get back to that, and the fact that nobody is offering that and only trying to drive wedges over bike lanes and duplexes, I think is a stark reality for politics in Vancouver.
Thank you. Rhea.
I think throughout this whole process, it's been very interesting to me that we're here, talking to the downtown DIA, but there's been very few solutions put forward for the small businesses in Vancouver, and we're the only party that's been doing that. I think the worst idea ever that I've been hearing throughout these debates that we've been at is that at a time when taxes have risen in the city all around us, so whether it's transit tax that went up on July 1st, you paid more to take transit, whether it's parking fees that went up, whether it's, we talked about the property taxes that went up for businesses. I mean, this is becoming unsustainable, and you all know it. That's why you're here. And these are serious issues at the city.
So what's the worst idea?
The worst idea is that Kennedy Stewart is saying he's going to triple taxes in the city and work hand in hand with Victoria. And he has not said, and I've asked him several times, how is he going to reduce taxes for the people of the city to make Vancouver livable again and affordable again? And he's refused to answer that question.
Shauna.
So I was going to say bike lanes, but the idea that there aren't other candidates that don't have platforms. I released my platform on small businesses 6 weeks ago. And it's so great to hear you develop some of those ideas, Wei Young. But I think I want to come back to the issue of bike lanes. The idea, and I think Hector is correct, creating wedge issues on something like a bike lane. I know that this is somehow creating divisiveness. If you really care about congestion, if you really care about transportation, and more importantly, if you care about people's safety,
In front of a hospital.
and
yes.
if you care about taxation, $2,200 a year is a subsidy to somebody that's driving. $700 for transit users. $69 for somebody cycling. Think of all of the bicycles that we have. how many cars are off the road when those cyclists come on board? So from a tax perspective, spending perspective, safety perspective, health perspective, GHG reduction perspective, it's a bit of a no-brainer on that one. So that's my issue. And
Thanks.
No.
Kennedy,
Right, well, of course
I
I.
think you got slapped a couple times.
Right.
You know.
No, of course, I never said I would triple taxes. What I said is I triple the empty homes tax because we have to do something to deal with the speculation here in the city, especially if it's from outside the country. So that tax seems to be working, and the great thing is that once the empty homes are filled up, it goes away. So you should reinforce good policy, and that's what I would do. So of course not tripling taxes. The biggest problem I see in this election, and what it is that none of the candidates here, except myself, have disclosed who's funding their campaigns. So today I'll be doing another disclosure where I list all donors that are giving me over $100, their name and the amounts that they're giving. And I think that's important because in the last election we had over $6 million flow through this election campaign. Now the rules have changed a little bit. So it's cut out, some of the money, but yet some candidates here have promised to disclose, and Ken said it's too complicated, so he can't do it, even though he's a chartered accountant. But I really think that this is a key issue here. It's about trust. We've got a change election happening, and so that's what I'm doing to prove my trust, and I'm worth trusting, is that I have disclosed all my donors, and I challenge the others yet again to do the same thing.
Can I just make one comment on that?
Yes.
So yes, I've actually checked your website out, and you actually have disclosed donors, but you haven't completed the picture. So I didn't see this group that actually pushed 100,000 pieces through the mail on your list. So, you talk about disclosure, but then you're actually not disclosing who your third party. No, hold on. You're not. I'm just responding. You're not disclosing who your third party supporters are, and then Peter Wall, who actually was one of the secret donors for another candidate, is now supporting you, and I didn't see him on your list either. He's being very public.
He's not a donor guy.
Well, okay, so
Okay, I think we understand the points here. By the way, I checked with the union and they spent $25,000 on that.
yeah, and we didn't see that on your disclosure list. So who else is
Okay, that's enough, thanks. The brawling will take place in the hallway outside. Yes, indeed. Yeah, we haven't tried that, arm wrestling. Okay, now back to the more serious issues that I know that you really care about. So one of the questions here is about business permits. So I'm not talking about development permits so much. That's my understanding of the question that you wanted. It's more like business permits that you need to open up a restaurant and get the liquor license and everything like that. So what would be your plan for business permits? Everyone's talked about how they speed things up in planning and so on. Good luck. But the business permit issue, and I'll start with David.
So we're supposed to be a technology hub, and yet we're like this backward city that doesn't use technology to advantage. So one advantage of the jack of all trades is in my own practice, we deal with life insurance. And I don't know how many of you actually dealt with insurance companies. And they faced this problem a long time ago. So what they did is they actually made the applications online so that if you did multiples in the future, you didn't have to recreate the profile, which is really a back-assward type of thing that happens in City Hall where you can do all that. But they have 3 levels of inspection. So if you do this online and no red flag comes up, boom, it's already approved and it's done. If it doesn't go through there and a red flag comes up, and this is about 10% of the cases, then it goes to a secondary set of ops. They're going to look at it because they get people that they look at a question and they go, well, is it this or is it that? And it really takes a human to make that decision if this is an innocuous answer or it's something that needs to be looked at. If it fails there, then it goes to a tertiary inspection, which is it's full-on underwriting. And this is the fastest way you can deal with permitting. If it's not out of the ordinary, get it through as fast as possible. If it needs to be looked at, let's pull in some teams by doing the stacks here. And that would be how I would recommend that we actually speed up permitting at City Hall. Thank you.
Hector.
So I mentioned before, core review, we want to make sure that we're streamlining and reorganizing City Hall to fit for the 21st century. We've never done that. I don't think any of your businesses would survive if you never reviewed your practices. Second thing that we want to be able to do is, to David's point, technology. But what it really means in practice is, thank you so much. What it really means in practice is that we should be able to get you your permits in many cases in the same day. So, for example, in Metro Vancouver, when a sewer or water system, for example, is designed, the actual engineering team can upload it into the servers of Metro Vancouver, and it red lights and green lights your project right away. It has algorithms and can read the project and can tell you if you're within the zone. And so we can do that in many cases for small businesses, very similar permits. We also want to treat commercial permits in commercial spaces as a concrete box. You're taking stuff in and out of a concrete box. It is developed. And we want to make sure that so long as basic health and safety are met and code is met, it will be fine. But we think that the granularity with which we have been putting on businesses, particularly music venues and hospitality venues, live music venues, has been onerous. And we need to be a great world city. Great world cities are just not that granular. We're focused, get you your permit, and move on with our day.
Rayan.
Wow. I've spent 20 years being a policy consultant, and in one of my roles there, of many, is to do core reviews and lead core reviews for different governments. So I was contracted by the City of Richmond to look at how they could provide better and more streamlined services, of which one of the key things, and we haven't talked about this yet, is diversity in the city. It's not just English language people with first English language to want to start up their own businesses in the city. So one of the key things that I would be looking at is having a multilingual unit, a small business unit at the city that is going to be almost like a one-stop shopping for small businesses where they can go, and I spoke about this earlier, to get all of their permitting in one place. Because currently, if you want to do a liquor license, you got to do this. If you want to get a permitting license to open a business, you got to do this. If you want to renovate your new business, you got to do this. And it's just all of the map, and it's costing businesses tens of thousands of dollars to do that. So that's number one. The other thing.
Sorry, you're out of time. Sorry. Maybe you can get to it in another answer. Shauna.
So one of the things that I'm interested in doing is looking at how we shift governance from out of our industrial model of thinking about governance to much more of a platform notion, modern government. One of the things that's going on right now is already a review looking at overlapping policies. I want in the first 100 days to be able to come back and say, here's those overlapping policies. Let's look at how we can streamline, really simplify what we're doing. Health and safety first, of course, but how can we speed things up? Because it's small businesses that are paying the price for ridiculous overlapping policy and permitting. So we can clean that up, we can create an ombudsperson office, we can try and really speed up the process for small business. Well, for business generally, it's not just small business, we're dealing with a situation where there is no excuse for the amount of time. That means we also need to listen to the workers on the front line. They have the best ideas in how to speed things up. We need to hear them, we need to engage them and understand where they see the efficiencies as well.
Okay. Someone agreed. Kennedy.
Great, well, I get really worried when I hear these plans that we're going to have core reviews, or we're going to massively cut taxes, or we're going to start, culling the civil service, because a lot of the problem with the permitting, with licensing too, is that we've got a big increase in these coming through the system, but we have basically the same number of staff and departments. So one experience on the building permits was that there was a backlog. There were 3 new clerks brought in temporarily to clear the backlog, and then those clerks were let go. So a lot of this has got to do with staffing. When the NPA was in power, of course, we had strikes because of this attack on the civil service, and we can't afford that. So for me, I think it's working with city staff. We have excellent city staff. They're known around the world, and people come and look at what we do here. But in fact, a lot of them are under too much pressure. So very simple adjustments in the number of staff working on particular issues is going to help, whether that's on a temporary or full-time basis. But we can't keep promising tax cuts without cutting services. And what my opponents are not saying is what services will they cut if they cut taxes.
Great. So I had first-hand experience because I've been through permitting hell like most of the business owners here. Basically, with all due respect, throwing people or technology at the problem will not solve the problem. Technology only speeds up what you're doing. So if you have a flawed process, you basically make more mistakes faster, so it doesn't work. Throwing people at it doesn't work as well. The big thing that we have going on at City Hall right now is the process is broken and people can't make decisions. So throwing more people at it, you can't make decisions, is actually going to make the work problem worse. And they actually tried it in 2016. The City Hall threw $2 million at it, didn't solve the problem. We're going to take a very pragmatic approach. We're actually going to change how the system works. We're going to fast track permits, so basically anything the standard is going to get approved right away, and then we're going to clean up the workflow after. I'm the only person who's not approaching this from a theoretical perspective. I understand workflow. Hospitals and health authorities across North America fly up to Vancouver to see what we are doing, and they take their our best practices back. There have been case studies written about us in business books and journals that are used around the world. We are known as workflow experts. We are not approaching this from a theoretical perspective.
Okay, did we start with, sorry, okay. That was interesting, because it was really some really different answers there. Hire more staff, technology, change the process, three fairly different things. I am now going to go to what I had announced earlier as the nerdiest question, since we're deep into policy here. CACs. Is there a problem with the current CAC system? How does it have to be changed? And we are testing you on your knowledge of what has already changed with the CAC system in the last few years. So go ahead, Hector.
Well, the CAC system over the last 15 years in particular has changed to a great degree. It's become something that was sort of an ancillary thing to becoming 1/3 of our budget. Staff, industry experts have been telling us the way that we're doing it currently is illegal. This negotiating taxes behind closed doors and this improper process has some challenges from a charter perspective. It also is one of the most onerous pieces of getting new projects approved. Sometimes developments can get trapped for years in these protracted CAC negotiations. Our city plan ends this and ends the relationship between developers and council. Is that we're putting a new city plan in place, pre-zoning, giving people surety that they know that a 60-story tower is not going to pop up in their backyard, but they do know that density is going to come in a planned way, and then that resources are going to get poured back into the community through a fixed-rate CAC that is scalable dependent on what you're building. But we need to drop the CACs on rental, and we need to build more rental now. And that's why our 3-year market correction program will make sure that we're pre-zoning for rental, making middle-class affordable housing legal again in the city of Vancouver. And when we are building CAC payable housing, that those resources are not going into the innovation fund, but actually going back into community.
Okay, great. Thank you. Leanne?
I think that the CAC system is completely broken, and it's broken because it's been shrouded in this obscurity and opaqueness that's been happening at City Hall. And we've seen this sort of evolve in the last decade, and that's happened in our city. Where are these dollars going? At a time when we're building at the same pace as Burnaby and Richmond, why are we in debt to the city of Vancouver, whereas Burnaby and Richmond are in surplus? And where are CACs going? You don't, wander around the city and see an incredible amount of infrastructure, hundreds of millions of dollars, as Hector was saying, over $400 million every year. These CACs has virtually disappeared. And so the issue is really how are these negotiated and why are they not transparent? Because they are negotiated behind closed doors. And as the only party that is 100% for the people, we are going to be looking at a transparency model. We're going to be looking at a planned model where neighborhoods have a say in how their neighborhoods are being planned. This is all going to feed into a city plan, and where the CACs are going to be recaptured within their neighborhood and not disappeared on some ledger sheet at City Hall and used somewhere else or gone elsewhere. Because the interests of the city currently with leadership is those interests are elsewhere. They're with business, developers, unions, special interest groups. That's where the money's been going.
Thank you.
I think we're all going to be speaking from the same choir that the CAC situation is far too opaque, but the CACs are critical for building community amenities. The problem is we've become addicted to the CACs. They've become increasingly a bigger part of our capital budget. I'm trying to understand why we've seen such a huge jump in the last year. The other thing is, yesterday and the head of Collingwood talked about CACs in terms of
in earlier versions being able to use the CAC as an endowment in perpetuity, providing a cash to an endowment that would enable them to have operating funds. Now they can only get it through capital. So that's also a shift, and I'm interested in seeing how we utilize CACs in the best possible way. The other thing is that there is a division between East and West because you're not getting the same level of CACs on the east end of a side of town as you do on the downtown core or the larger towers. So how do we deal with the inequity that's going on across the city in where those CACs are applied? There's a whole range of questions here that we have to deal with. 6 weeks ago, I identified this as a big area of concern, and we need to get a handle on it.
Thank you. Kennedy?
Yeah, well, I'm like the rest of the folks here on the panel, that I am disturbed about how the CACs are negotiated. They seem to be willy-nilly, but what really disturbs me is that the person that's negotiating for the city can just walk across the street and then go work for one of the biggest developers. So what we need is a cooling off period, and I announced we would do this, bringing in tough new conflict of interest rules. Also the problem is that we have unequal access here in the city, where small businesses often feel shut out of City Hall, but large-scale businesses, developers in particular, seem to have unfettered access. So that's why conflict of interest rules are important. I've operated under them for 7 years federally. Also a lobbyist registry. So federally, if I spoke to a lobbyist, that has to be recorded and transparent and on the websites where people can see this. We don't have any of this at City Hall now. The other thing is that if you work in the actual industry, like they do in Montreal, you shouldn't be able to sit on City Council. And so it's a question of access and transparency, and that would go a long way to cleaning up the problem that we have here.
Okay, that was a long way from CACs, but you got your message out.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
well, I'll be very quick. Obviously, the CAC process is broken. What it should look like is it should be incredibly certain, it should be transparent, so a developer or anyone who's building should know what the CAC is before they buy the piece of dirt or property. That's the first thing we're going to do. The second thing is the CAC should be put into the local community. And so we switch the equation around, where people aren't trying to fight density or fight development. Instead, the conversation will look like, well, you know what, if we accept a bit of density, we can actually get 10 or 15 or $20 million for our community center. And that will actually change the conversation. That's what we intend to do.
David?
So I think that in this group, I'm sure there are some developers, but I'm sure that a lot of you aren't and don't even know what a CAC is. So it's a community amenity contribution. And if you think about this, if you're developing for density, you're bringing new populations in, you're going to have a huge toll on the infrastructure around us, community centers, roads, et cetera, et cetera. So it is actually a required evil to sustain what is coming with what you're building. The problem is on two fronts, and as everybody said, it's not a transparent process. One of the things that you can do to make it transparent is actually have a community plan so you know what density you're building, you know what the target CACs have to be in order to create the infrastructure to sustain that population that's coming. But there's another troubling thing that I found inside there. So if you look deep within the city finances, they say CAC in kind. And what that means to those that don't know, if I put this glass on the table and I say, well, I owe you $1 for CACs, but I'm going to give you this glass because it's worth $1. Well, is it? What if it's worth 80 cents? You actually just gift the city 20 cents. The problem with business, and you all know this, we're not in a barter economy. Cash is king. You provide a service or a product, you want cash. The city needs that cash. It can't deal with these swapty dues, especially when they're supporting neighborhood houses and the amenities that need cash to actually operate. At that level, business owners know, if you have that buying power, I can get you a better deal. But I can't do that with the swap to do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just to change things up again a little bit, cannabis. It's coming. It's not on me right now. It's coming. The city is going to play a role. What do you see the city needing to do? Is the current system that's been devised good enough, or does there need to be more? William?
Well, clearly the current system is that there's been illegal dispensaries across the city, and so the city is actually taking them to court, and there's some kind of action happening around that, which I fully support. Because the issue is that they are completely unlicensed. Cannabis is happening, it's going to become legal in this country. So what we need to do as the city of Vancouver is we need to transition that so that it becomes from an illegal activity to a legal activity. And so the city has a role in that in terms of licensing, in terms of maintaining standards, and we will have the highest standards for this because it is a drug, and so we need to ensure that it meets certain standards. So for myself and our party, we believe in the high standards, we believe in licensing, we believe in maintaining the really good laws that we already have in place. For example, there is currently no smoking in restaurants. Well, that should be the same for cannabis, okay? So we have existing bylaws that protect us, and so we will be maintaining those bylaws as well as ensuring that we transition properly with the new act.
Okay, and because this is the second round and I want to change things up a little bit, so tiring for everyone, I was speaking the same order and then go to Hector next.
Yeah, so this is a huge issue that we're going to have to deal with. Every council, it doesn't matter who's on council, is going to have to deal with this issue. It becomes legal on October 17th. The province has brought down their regime, and you're going to be able to transition people through a licensed retail process. We have about 20-ish stores that are sort of fully compliant, and those people will be front of the line to get fully licensed. But there are really somewhere in the neighborhood of around 170 stores in total that we're dealing with. And so earlier this year, I went to staff and we developed a plan to actually go after property owners because the city's been unsuccessful and is limited within the charter and some of the other bounds in order to be able to go after the individual illegal operator. And we were able to go to the property owner and say, if you're leasing to an illegal business that we have not sanctioned, then we will penalize you. But we need to recognize that this is actually a great opportunity for Vancouver. It's going to create a lot of jobs, and we should work with industry in partnership. It's going to be a challenge. It's not always going to be easy, but this is something that we are going to have to innovate with, because we can't even deal with the permits now, let alone 40,000 basement suites and 100 or 70 new cannabis stores.
Okay. And it will be a big part of the economy. Recently, the San Francisco Board of Trade came up with 40 people in their delegation, and a big component of the delegation was people in the cannabis business who are now welcomed, like, as though they're Lululemon or Microsoft or something like that. Shauna?
I'm actually not in disagreement too much with what Hector is saying. I think the issue is this is going to be a legal business. I would expect and treat them as a business community. They need to adhere to the bylaws, they need to adhere to licensing, we need to be in compliance. I would treat them as a business, as I would treat any sector as a business.
David?
So when we're talking about cannabis, we got a few problems. First of all, we got provincial and federal jurisdiction that's coming into play. And I'll be honest, we don't truly know what's in the regulations and how that actually impacts us. To prove that point, when the TFSA was made legal, it took us 2 years through courts and understanding what you could and could not do when you were offsite. So we can't really say how this is going to turn out right now. But there is a need for regulation. Don't get me wrong, I'm a scientist, here's a scientific geek hat coming on. There are benefits to medicinal marijuana, and that's why it's coming in. But here's a problem. So I've talked to a company called Nomus Holdings, which is one of the leading providers of sanctioned government grow. And there needs to be a lot of regulation, because when you're talking about street operations, we have problems with fecal content, mold, and all kinds of contaminants inside there, whereas a government-provided source doesn't have that problem. So when we're looking at licensing, we need to do that, but we also need to get to a point where we have tax lien licensing and enforcement. The problem is we can issue a fine, but it goes nowhere. You go to collections, whatever, it doesn't do anything. But if you can throw it onto somebody's property taxes, now you've got your attention. You don't want to deal with it, 2 years we're going to have legal action go after your property, right? So we need to have that in place. Nobody's talked about cannabis supporting events. Well, this is going to become an issue, because right now with our 420 event, it's not a demonstration anymore. It is a full-on commercial event. So we need to start to clamp down upon that and actually treat these like businesses and treat them the same way as any other narcotic or alcohol or substance that is controlled. Thank you.
Thanks. Kennedy?
Yeah, well, I actually think the attitude here is totally wrong. This is an enormous opportunity for this city. We need industry here. We need new industry. The Fraser Institute says that marijuana in British Columbia is at least a $7 billion industry. When I was the shadow minister for science and technology, we couldn't stop National Research Council scientists leaving Ottawa and coming to BC to develop new products. So the R&D potential here is enormous for our city. We're already experts. We already have a market here. We have the expertise. It's going to be legal. And so what we have to do is as a mayor, you have to go out and attract that business. So this is, they say that marijuana drinks may actually start displacing alcohol beverages, and that is a massive world market. So if Vancouver could be the hub of R&D for cannabis research, it would be great. It would be great for tourism. I know we're talking about business licenses here, but it's also how we imagine ourselves as a city and how are we going to attract global business. So I do think us being a leader in R&D in cannabis research would be a fantastic thing, and that's absolutely what I would try to do, is go out and get that business to come here.
Okay. Cam?
Yeah, so obviously the laws are changing on October 17th. Whoever's mayor on November 5th is going to inherit the whole situation here. It's our position that we're basically going to follow the laws and support our businesses and make sure that we clamp down on illegal activities. And just in general, I believe it is the role of the mayor and council to create an environment where all businesses can succeed. I don't think we should be focused on any one industry, because we already have enough challenges with housing, transportation, what's going on in the downtown east side, and let's focus on that. And if we create a great environment, all our businesses can survive and thrive.
Okay, thank you. A question from the audience about Granville Street. The Granville Entertainment District has seen better days. What policies, if any, will you implement to shape this district? And I'm asking this one over some of the more general ones because I think this is the only audience where it will get asked. So I'm going to start with Shauna.
Thanks. This is something that the DVBIA and its members have been trying to address for years. Trying different things, creating more pedestrian focused, creating more vibrant. One of the things I love about the new DVBIA strategy is that it's really putting a focus on public spaces, how to create a vibrant downtown core where food, entertainment, arts, culture is not just within the facilities, but it's in the street, that we are a place that people come to, that we become a destination. The Granville Entertainment District is critical for that. But it also needs to be created in a way that is much more conducive to families and people coming into the area. We're still not there yet. It's somewhere between a pedestrian area and not. And we haven't found that secret sauce yet, but it is the businesses of that community, it's the people that live and work there that have the best ideas, and those are the things that I want to support the DVBIA in bringing forward.
David.
So from memory, when I spent my time in Montreal, Montreal does an interesting thing. It spreads out its entertainment district. And our challenge right now, in my opinion, is we've got the entertainment district so concentrated that the problem is when you get people going there drinking and they come out, they get combative. But when you spread people out, that lessens. So I think we do need to think about distributing where everything is, making sure that our clubs are not too close together, making sure capacities are not so high that we're going to run into these risks. We're seeing this a lot. I mean, lately we've had, unfortunate murders that have happened up there. And that's what, in my opinion, is concerning a lot of people. I used to live down Yaletown, and I'll tell you, coming back from a meeting where suddenly the entertainment district comes alive, I've been attacked in a business suit. And I looked at this and I'm like, really? Why? Why is it that we don't feel safe there? So we do need to balance off the need to have entertainment, the need for commercial activity, but to disperse it so that we can't hit that critical mass. Critical mass with people that are upset and under the influence is a true problem, and it's a true challenge for a lot of cities. But I look towards Montreal, they're more aggressive in a lot of things that we do. They keep bars open until 3, and they don't have the same types of problems. So let's look towards, how they manage their business districts and their entertainment districts. Thank you.
Okay, Cam.
Yeah, so I actually don't feel safe on the Granville Strip late at night, and I take my kids down to the downtown east side 3 or 4 times a year with other families, and we feel safer there at night than we do on the Granville Strip. It's a big issue. I don't profess to be an expert in all these issues. That's not the point. What we would do is actually work with the Downtown Vancouver BIA and look for you to provide solutions, and as a city, we would support it.
Well, I just look at the potential here. So I was a musician when I moved out here from Nova Scotia, and I played the Commodore like 50 times. I love like the potential of the Granville Strip, and I do actually like that the bars and venues are concentrated, because it does give us an opportunity to manage it better than if it's spread out. But part of the problem is that people get trapped here. So they come down, they go for a night of drinking, and then they can't get home. They can't drive because they're intoxicated. So that's why we need these kind of late transit stuff. That's exactly what. So if you go to London, they have night buses, right? And this is how, then you have a 24-hour city. So we've built this kind of 24-hour downtown entertainment zone. We just haven't put the transportation in that we need to get people back in their houses. But I really think that the potential here is enormous, and it could be one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting places in North America to come. And that's what I like to try to do, work with the BIA to make sure we can make that happen.
Great. Well, yeah.
I think, I've lived in Vancouver long enough, over 50 years, that I remember that Granville Street strip being so vibrant. You came down, you had a great time, you went home, and etc. So the question is really about the Granville Street and what happened to it. And I think that various experiments have happened to it, and some of them have taken off for a little bit, and then it seems to have fizzled. I think primarily the issue right now is the lack of cleanliness and safety, as Ken was saying. People don't feel safe down there, there's been incidents, and so that's why in our plan we propose a clean city plan, where we're going to double the number of garbage receptacles, we're going to clean up the city, we're going to have additional bylaw officers, we're going to help the businesses by giving them what they've asked for. And so in meeting with the different businesses across Vancouver, they've said, you need to give us some tools to use so that we can get the vagrants out of our doorways, people sleeping out inside of our doorways, so that our customers can come through. We need to have more boots on the ground so that people can be checking these people for safety, for knives. And so I've heard so many horror stories around the stores in the downtown core where the staff has been threatened, where there's post-traumatic stress, and it's an incredibly heartbreaking to hear that that's actually happening, and businesses are having to close down because of that. So we need to clean that up, we need to clean up our city.
Well, we're certainly getting different images of Granville here. Hector.
Well, they're not vagrants, they're humans, and they're people with mental health issues that have not been supported over a lot of years of inaction. But earlier this year, what I did earlier this year was bring forward a motion along with George Affleck to turn around the Granville Strip, and we worked in partnership with the DVBIA, the Granville Entertainment businesses, we worked with the VPD, the bar program, Bar Watch rather, is a brain fart there for a second. But we worked with very closely also with the Taxi Association, and we're engaging with transit, and that's where we were sort of first in inches on the late night transit. They ultimately asked if it was okay if they could promote the late night bus service, so that's why you see the bus advertising right now, because that was an outcome of that. But we ultimately, our plan was to reprogram the street to actually allow for everything from food carts to actual concerts to take place on the actual street, to program the street, because right now people pour out into that central area and there's nothing to do. Late night transit, of course, cab stands, more flexible hours and operation types for bar types, and also a long-term plan to rezone the Granville Strip to put more jobs along the strip and mix the community down there. If you look at the success or future about to be success of spaces in the old Tom Lee building there, that's going to put 500 new tech workers on the street, and that's going to dramatically change the environment down there, and there's so much more that we can do.
Great, thank you. A related question, homelessness. Feel free to say that you're going to end it by a particular year. Or whatever your plan is. Kennedy.
Yeah, well, homelessness is, the housing crisis is the biggest thing in this election. You feel it everywhere, wherever you go, whether it's labor costs, whether it's renters not being able to afford where they are, getting on the housing ladder, but really the folks that are suffering the most are folks that are on the street. And you know, I used to work at the park board as an at-risk youth worker, and you kind of see what happens when people start going down that road, losing a job, suffering mental illness or addiction, and we really just haven't provided enough housing. And so that's why it's important to have a plan to do that, and that's why I've said 25,000 rentals that would be affordable, run by nonprofit organizations. We have great nonprofits in the city that can already start doing this. We just haven't invested enough in that. And so that's the plan. The only way you're going to manage homelessness, because you can't solve it. It's a city that cities always have folks moving through, new people coming, and you have to manage it. And so the way you manage it is to build housing. I do think the temporary modular housing has been a good start, well used, and we need more of it.
Ken?
So homelessness is a big issue, and I know it's it's a citywide issue, province-wide issue, countrywide issue. But I'm just going to talk about the downtown east side, just to give a little bit of context here. My I grew up basically spending a lot of time in the downtown east side as a little kid. I take my kids there and other families there, so it's personal for me. If you look at the downtown east side, over $1 million goes into the downtown east side every single day. In fact, the number is closer to $1 billion a year, so it's not a lack of financial resources. There are also over 200 community support groups in the downtown east side. People that really care, that are really smart. So it's not a lack of people. What it is really a lack of coordination and a lack of political courage. So we've already set up a task force to help us come up with suggestions on what we should do. The next step on the downtown east side is people from those 200 community support groups. And I'm committing to you right here, right now, which I've done before. I will articulate those recommendations, and I will have the political courage to implement those recommendations, because as Mayor of Vancouver, I'm not going to carry myself in a way that I'm afraid, that I'm looking to be re-elected. I'm going to carry myself in a way where I'm not afraid to be fired, so we can actually have a big impact on this issue.
Thank you. David, Ken?
So I live in Strathcona. I'm actually 3 blocks from Oppenheimer Park, which is part of Ground Zero. Now, let's also be realistic when we're talking about the homeless issue. It's not just the marginalized. We're actually getting a slippage where the middle class on the lower end is now sliding into the underhoused. How many of you have noticed that the caravans of campers and temporary tents have popped up on all our industrial roads? This is a huge warning sign, because Brett, who's actually on our team, works with some of those people. It's not that they're mentally ill. It's not that they're marginalized. They can't afford housing here. So everything is tied together. We have to work on housing prices. We have to work on getting the global unregulated speculation out of the system so that we have homes for local businesses and taxpayers. Now, when we're talking about the downtown east side, there's a couple things we have to think about. So we got rid of the 4-pillar system. We need to bring that back. We also have to start changing the way we look at those that have mental health issues. So one of the experiments in Helsinki is we're working with a guaranteed minimum basic income. We're in a poverty system, and anybody who knows the downtown east side knows there's a poverty business. We need to get rid of that. We need to start elevating what we're doing at the bottom end, because there's research out there that says that we're paying over $134,000 a year to deal with those that are marginalized. But if we actually improve the benefits, we could drop that cost. That's the starting point. Thank you.
Hector?
Well, the way that you don't solve it is by choosing to elect those that have been overseeing the problem for the last 30 years. We don't need a task force. You don't need to talk to the province. You don't need to talk to the federal government. I worked there, and I know. We were trying to spend $20 million on no-barrier housing in the city of Vancouver. That would help the people that are so-called vagrants in the city get off the streets once and for all. It's respectful housing that has all the supports and services that they need, and they can get indoors, and it's long-term, and it's stable. 10 SkyTrain stops away, New Westminster. They were able to accomplish this. Now, you can eliminate poverty. Poverty is going to be real. Mental health is a big challenge, but we cannot institutionalize people on any long-term basis. I'm sorry, but whenever someone says to you, Riverview, just tell them, shh, stop, get over it. We're way past this. So we need community care. We need community care now, No barrier housing is the solution. We have been extraordinarily weak on this. We have been playing politics with this issue for too long. And the downtown east side's overly restrictive density caps and heights caps on this is hurting real plans right now that the Union Gospel Mission is trying to do, that the Salvation Army is trying to do, and we're nickel and diming them on a couple floors when they're trying to get people off the street.
Okay, thank you. Leah?
I worked on the downtown east side for over 10 years as a financial aid worker and also as a native outreach worker. And so I have been down there. I also volunteered down there, put in a breakfast program for children that's still running 30 years later. And during this time, I learned a lot, and we absolutely have to do something in the downtown east side. And that is my passion for why I want to run for the city of Vancouver, because I became a foster parent. I wanted to bring those kids home. I raised 7 foster children in my home because of the downtown east side. And my foster son died down there. That should never happen to any family, to any parent. And we are seeing a crisis happening down there, and that needs to be solved. What we need to be doing down there is have leadership, which has been lacking for the last decade. We need to be repurposing the money. It's not throwing more money at it because, as Ken said, there's so many services down there, but we need leadership in terms of redoing the how that's done in that area. But more critically, we need mental health supports. And that has not happened. I worked down there when they closed Riverview, and all those people ended up on the street overnight, literally. And so we need to be pounding the province to be getting the treatment that these people need and providing it to them, absolutely. And we need to be building long-term, not just temporary housing for these people. And I really resent the term temporary housing. It needs to be long-term, barrier-free housing, and we need to get the people they absolutely need.
Thank you. And there's some excellent ideas that are coming up, and I want to acknowledge that. I put out a home strategy about a month ago, and it called for 2,800 units at the shelter disability rate. We're at 2,100 in our homeless count. I went to 2,800 because often women are not included in those homeless counts. You don't see them, they're not visible. I've asked 1,000 units to be focused on women. Women are often selling sex just to find a place to stay. So we need to address those structural issues that are impeding us in dealing with homelessness. We've got to bring back the 4-pillar approach. I agree completely with Wei Young that the focus on treatment and prevention are really important in addition to the harm reduction and enforcement. We haven't had enough focus there. We need to really rethink, we did in downtown Vancouver with DVBIA, we reimagined downtown Vancouver. I helped lead that process with Charles Gauthier. Why can't we engage the people that live, work, and play in the downtown east side in terms of reimagining that community? Let's look at the public spaces, how to invigorate those, animate those. How do the people who are on the street get funding to do the garbage pickup rather than having our city workers with pitchforks down there? There are so many things that we can do if we begin with a community asset approach and really build out from that community.
Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. There's a lot that has come in here. So I am I think I'm going to pick 2 more. Property crime, which is a big issue in the downtown. It's, the area that gets hit the hardest by this. And arts and culture, those 2 things. So, also very important in the downtown area. So I'll start with arts and culture, I think, and go ahead with Ken. Ken's in. Yes.
It's okay. Once again, I mentioned my son. He doesn't see a future for himself in Vancouver and for his friends as well. And one of the reasons is he doesn't see a buzz in the city. And so, arts are incredibly important. It actually adds to the buzz of the city. We have to support the arts. It also makes a lot of economic sense. It's a big economic driver, and you should be promoting it as well. And so the few things we're going to do: 1, we are supportive of the Vancouver Art Gallery finding a new home, and we'll support that. 2, I didn't get a chance to talk about what we're going to be doing on city-owned land. We're going to be building purpose-based rentals, but that gives us an opportunity as well to create spaces where artists can get together, and art facilities as well. And so we'll be doing that. The third thing is, you know, and it goes back to property taxes on the commercial side. We need to address it because a lot of our venues that provide, you know, the buzz for the city, like, you know, venues where bands can play, for example, they're getting pushed out of their venues because they can't afford property taxes, and we'll address that as well.
I just have to ask a follow-up question. When you say you support a new home for the bag, what does that mean? More than what the city's doing now?
Yeah, well, we're going to be working with them. We've already sat down with the Vancouver.
Like money?
Well, we'll see what the plan is.
Land?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
David?
When we talk about arts, I mean, here's a reality check. I'm sure all of you don't work just to pay bills. You want to enjoy life. And part of enjoying life, you have to bring arts and culture into the equation. Now, I've got clients that are artists, and I've worked with a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people. One of my neighbors is actually one of the board of directors of the East Van Culture Club. And the challenge that they're having is that they actually don't have small long-term space for artists, and we need that. Another challenge that we have, and this was when I did my time with Vancouver Foundation, we're working with a social enterprise, and I'm sorry, but I forget the name of that one, but we need curated space that actually allows smaller artists to actually display and sell their artwork. And we don't have this. The city has looked at everything from sort of a social economic perspective, more on the economic, less on the social in my opinion, and we have to look at the social because there are these soft factors in judging whether or not we get involved with something, and that soft factor is actually really important. Here's a geek factor that comes in. So when I was younger, I used to play simulation games about civilizations. And if your civilization's not happy, they're not going to go to work, they're not going to make money, they're not going to make your society stronger, they're not going to pay taxes. So let's think a lot more about how we actually make this a more interesting, more diverse, more fun city, but specifically supporting those small artists that are having a tremendously difficult time finding that space and, you know, working with their trade. Thank you.
Thanks. Hector?
Yeah, I think one of the really unfortunate things about the arts is that it's often talked about separate from the economy, but of course it's such a huge part of our economy here. It goes everything from live music venues and, you know, why does someone, you know, fly into Vancouver and stay at a $300 or $400 or $500 or $600 a night hotel room? I mean, they come here to come see great concerts. They get to come see Kennedy at the Commodore, I guess. And so we have this also creative economy in the sense that, you know, it's a big part of our digital sphere. So our digital creative side. I'm really proud of Phyllis Tang, who's running for City Council. She's in the back there, and she's going to be leading our arts economy file. But it's going to include everything from a music officer being in the city manager's office to a night mayor, as it's called, and having a real hospitality program for Vancouver. Yes, a world-class city for fun and tourism. But remember, arts and culture is not only makes it a wonderful place to live, but people want to be here. But we have to also remember is that tourism is tied very closely to this. And we need to make sure that people get their permits faster, that we're not so granular, that we cut the red tape, and we just say yes.
Okay. And a nightmare. Would that be a counselor or somebody different?
No, it'd be like similar to the Amsterdam model where you have an elected sort of position, so to speak, and this person would be the hospitality. Not a general election, it's elected by the BIAs and membership.
Okay, great. Wei Hang.
My daughter is an artist. She's studying at the Ontario College of Art and Design, so art has been a huge part of our lives ever since she was 3. She's been juried and she's shown at the National Gallery and all kinds of things. So art is, again, a huge part. When I was a member of Parliament, we had one of the largest infrastructure funds in Canada. I actually brought over 60 infrastructure projects to the city. When I met with the city leadership at the time, I wanted that art gallery complex so bad. It was not a priority for them, and that's why it didn't happen. So as the mayor of the city of Vancouver, I'm going to make that happen. It's going to be on my priority list, and that includes funding, it includes leadership, it includes leveraging. I want this city to be the most incredible destination arts and cultural city in the world. And I'm not just talking about visual art, I'm talking about music, I'm talking about sculpture, and we need to support our artists in every single way. Because there's no reason why in Vancouver, we have amazing artists that are internationally well known outside of Vancouver, but they don't have show space, they don't have rehearsal space. I was talking to Lucille Pacey, who founded Arts Umbrella, and so there is such an incredible lack of support for our artists in the city, and we have so many beautiful places where people can display their art or do their art, and workshops, etc. That's why I fully support the art gallery complex, the workshops, and we need to actually not just have one place for that, but that needs to be throughout the city.
Okay, and unfortunately, you, unlike me, are not sitting next to Hector, who's providing little asides. Yes, who commented the art gallery is never going to happen, so maybe someone else can address that as well. Sean?
So when I was on the board of Van City, we brought in Jose Luis Sacco to do an analysis of what the economy was for Vancouver in terms of the arts. He came away absolutely blown away. He said, we have the ecosystem for one of the most vibrant creative economies in the world, and we need to build the infrastructure for that. So you've seen a real growth in our creative economy. Most of it's come in the digital, but there is so much more. I actually completely disagree with Hector. We are going to get at Laurel Park, the art gallery, but the thing is I don't want to take just 2/3 of it for the art gallery and have the other for commercial towers. I want, you get to do this once, let's integrate this. Let's ensure that there's artist live, work, show spaces in that. Let's really ensure that the creative economy is housed there, that there's commercial sector there as well that's related to the arts. Arts to me isn't just the high arts. It's not just the art gallery, the opera, and the symphony. It's grassroots spaces. It's those very vibrant, innovative, young innovators that are bringing arts into the economic spaces. We did, when I was at SFU Public Square, we did a whole youth innovator crawl. It was incredible how many young innovators we have that are working in the art space. This is one of the most exciting parts of our economy that we can grow, and we have such a great base. And I think we can also create housing authorities for artists and live, work, and show spaces. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's the second round of applause today, so I'm glad it's generating so much passion. Kennedy.
Well, I mean, arts and culture is really just about telling stories, and we have such amazing stories here in the city. One of I guess the most incredible ones are the fusion stories, where we have, say, Indigenous and Asian cultures coming together and producing stuff that nobody's ever seen around the world. And I think that's definitely something that our economy can benefit from if we promote it. So in my platform, what I've said is 100,000 square feet of new creative space, because when I was a musician, that was the hardest thing, is to find a place to kind of create music, to work out new ideas and songs. And that's all disappearing at a very rapid rate. So we have potential to lose up to 50,000 square feet over the next few years as city buildings are kind of torn down or released. On the art gallery, I have looked at the numbers. I would love to have an art gallery here, but I really worry about the city putting in $100 million or something into this without further negotiation. So what I've said is there's currently a memorandum of understanding with the city that expires next year. What I said is I would extend that for another year so we could negotiate and try to get more private sector partners in on the art gallery, because again, the way it's financially structured right now is difficult, but I would really love to have it here, and I would fight for that.
Okay, I've gotten to everyone? Yes. I'm sorry, I obviously can't calculate time. So it is almost 10 o'clock, and I have to wrap up. There's so many other interesting questions I wish we could have gotten to. Property crime, hotels, what's happening with hotels, the green city, all kinds of interesting comments that came in, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to everything. But I know that some of you apparently have jobs to go to and a living to earn. So we will have to end it here. And hopefully, maybe in another forum, some of those other questions can get addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good way to wrap up with a lot of passion around the arts. Should ask Beth Leopard to hang around maybe today, come watch you guys. I want to start with thanking Frances. She's a local icon in journalism. I'm not sure if people know her that well personally, but you've probably read a bunch of her stuff. And just notice the name when you read it through the newspaper and through the Globe. She's so great at her job. This is on my notes, Frances. So
okay, running for mayor.
Yeah. tricycle lanes. Francis will have tricycle lanes. At least one person did that. So with the candidates, I've always been inspired by local politics at a local level, not just from the work that we do on the urban planning sides, but it's the biggest impact that you can make on a day-to-day life of a person's home and for the business. So it's not an easy job. I want to thank all the candidates for putting your names forward for public service. Let's thank the candidates again for stepping up every single day. What was the slogan? Yeah, this year's election slogan is, "It's your city, your vote." And with about 100 or so people in this room, you and your households have the potential of impacting this election. You could even potentially decide this election as well. And you cannot complain about politics unless you actually go and vote as well. So the advanced polling begins next week. Is that correct? Right, October 10th, that's a week from now. The election's earlier, usually it was in November, it's in October. So the advanced polling is October 10th to the 17th. Election day is October 20th. So just want to remind you of that, Luca.
So I just want to say one more thank you to our moderator, Francis Bula. Francis, your expertise was a huge asset in today's discussion, and we just couldn't imagine having done this event without you. As a token of our appreciation for your involvement today, we have made a donation in your name to your preferred charity, the Mount Pleasant Neighborhood House. Thank you for everything that you do for our city.
That's great. Yeah, we donated to the neighborhood house last week too. We had a great playground project that we were trying to finish up. That's a wrap. I want to thank all of you as our DVI members for coming to this event. Thank you very much. Hopefully you're much more informed now. One housekeeping item, you can come to our renewal consultation sessions in October and November. Check your email for that. Can the candidates please stay behind for a photo? That's it. Have a great day. Don't forget to vote.